GM to YouTube. All right. The Jmods did a little like Reddit AMA about Yama after there was like a bunch of confusion and stuff. So they answered like a ton of questions about Yama. A lot of it is really good insight into what we can expect when the update happens on Wednesday, but also just a lot of like the devs' thoughts on things. Really, really interesting insight into what was happening. Some of it I think is really good. Some of it I think is not so good. We kind of get into that. But I wanted to mainly discuss the idea that wealth redistribution, that's a very hard word to say, wealth redistribution from the super rich players down to mid-level players needs to happen through PVM gatekeeping. So that's towards the end. I first wanted to just like show some of the stuff they talked about and confirmed for Yama. So if you just want news about what the boss is going to be, that'll be first, and then we'll get like more discussion heavy towards the end. That's the plan. I'm just kind of going in order. I've sort of sorted like a bunch of screen caps of things that were discussed. So the first question that was asked was, I know this boss is marketed towards endgame players with max gear. Would someone with high 90 stats and Blood Moon gear be able to get by with another player with similar gear, or even another player with max? Or would it not be worth doing due to contributions? Asking because this is about where my iron is, and Arcane says you'll definitely be able to get kills once you get mechanics down. Your kills will be slower, you'll take more damage, you'll lose more prayer, but eventually if you play well, you will succeed. I'm going to be sending it on my 1600 total iron this weekend. Really interesting. So it sounds like it's fairly doable at most levels. Now, to be fair, Arcane is really good at the game. He's a genuinely very good player. He could probably do Fasani at 1600 total level, right? I don't think he's saying like, yes, every 1600 total can just go do this, but it's good to hear that you're not like locked at super high stats or you need crazy gear or anything like that. Like Arcane is planning to kill it soon. It sounds like this is fairly accessible for everybody. Okay, to the next one. I sort of think of difficulty in different categories. Colosseum, Inferno are prayer difficulty, pray the right thing on the right tick, keep a consistent rhythm. Vardorvis is movement difficulty, very precise movements and tight reaction windows to make these movements, but ultimately you're just kind of hitting boss praying melee. Fasani is punishing difficulty, mechanics aren't super difficult, but extremely punishing. Fasani and Verzik are confusing to learn. Any single mechanic, again, isn't insanely difficult, but there's just a ton going on, multiple phases, etc. What would you say the difficulty for Yama lie? Yama can be quite punishing. I don't think many mechanics are confusing. There's quite a lot of movement involved and some prayer and gear switching involved. There's one mechanic, if you fail entirely, you will die. This makes me think of like Nilo pillars, like when you lose all four, it just kills you. A little nervous when he says it can be quite punishing when the example of punishing was Fasani. I feel like Fasani is punishing in kind of a more boring way, where it's not a ton of stuff going on, but when you do end up getting hit, you take like 80 damage. I'm hoping it's not quite like that, and it's more so like death by 1,000 cuts versus getting one shot all the time, but I guess we'll see. I'm curious about death mechanics within the fight. If one player dies, is the encounter over? Does the other get to try to finish? Does the dead player sit in a cage like Tob or as a ghost like Toa, or is it straight to Lumbridge? Straight to Lumby. Remaining player can stay and try to close it out. So this sounds exactly like Duo Nex, where like if somebody dies in P5, your duo partner could finish it, but like the other person doesn't get their roll for the loot and they're just gone. Will Yama likely have any medium combat achievements or even increase the medium points needed? Lowest CA tier for Yama is likely to be elite. It would be crazy if there were medium CAs for this boss. Considering the difficulty, that'd be very interesting. Will Yama have Demon Bane reduction? No, but that doesn't mean all that much without the rest of his stats to contextualize the Demon Bane weapons there. Monster Examine will be enabled upon release, so take a peek on Wednesday. If you are curious about what things you might want for said boss, I did double check. If the boss is 250 mage or higher, T-Bow is just consistently going to beat Scobo. So if it's a ranged encounter, T-Bow will beat Scobo, assuming Yama has crazy mage level. It's possible. Same goes for most of the Mega Rares. Like, all the Mega Rares are just a bit better than the Demon Bane weapons, assuming the right stats. I personally feel like Mega Rares are going to be Biss, and then it's going to be Demon Bane or just below it, 5 to 10% worse. That would be my guess, but all I can do is guess. We don't know the stats. I have no idea. Will the two players have to equally rely on each other's PVM skills to kill the boss, or have you made it so one person can do the majority of the fight and the other can be carried a little bit? Yama can be entirely soloed, just that some mechanics are less forgiving and very tight. I'd say it's more so in the lines of how Royal Titans encourages duo play than something like Tob that effectively just blocks out most players from soloing entirely. The boss does not scale in any way, whether that's stats or mechanics, similar to like Nex or Titans, where it's the same boss no matter what. Interesting info to glean here is that Titans is actually kind of just better solo, unless solo for rares is going to be faster for Titans, unless you're in a duo or unless you're going for pet, then duo is a lot better because it's the same pet rate no matter what scale you're in, but the rares do scale. Like there's double chance for solo effectively. So I would expect solo to be quite a decent way of farming the boss, which I think kind of stinks. I really wanted it to be primarily duo. So they're saying this in addition to the contracts all being solo. It seems like they're really leaning towards allowing people to solo if they want, which is great for the people out there that don't have duo partners, but it's a shame for the people that wanted like more group content. So this one was, when I heard of an endgame duo boss fight, I was imagining fight mechanics that specifically required 2 people to coordinate in a specific way to succeed in the fight. Based on what we've heard so far, the fight has no true duo mechanics. For example, a mechanic that specifically requires 2 people to coordinate correctly, where one person messing up fails the mechanic. I personally find this disappointing, as a boss specifically designed to be a duo boss can introduce some unseen mechanics and skill checks in old school. Was this a specific design choice? I would completely agree with this user. I think group content adds a lot of complexity that you don't see in solo. Whilst the fight and all of its mechanics are fully soloable, there are mechanics that become more interesting and more rewarding, specifically in a duo, and benefit from a more coordinated duo. This means we expect the fight to be more fun, have more room for optimization, and more emergent gameplay in duos. But there's a lot of players who want to be able to enjoy the encounter solo. Some of them are on a mission, some of them are also PGIMs. I don't know what that even means. Some just have more fun that way. And so we have a motivation to make the encounters at the very least completable by these players, and preferably decently fun too. So it sounds like it's designed to be doable solo, maybe not best solo necessarily, but likely very solid. So if you don't have a duo partner, it'll probably just be just fine. The kills are going to be a lot longer, maybe a little bit harder, but it's definitely going to be doable, it sounds like, based on everything they're saying. Good morning, afternoon. What are the mining smithing requirements going to be for making the armor? 78 mining, 83 smithing. Fairly reasonable. You're not seeing anything in the 90s or anything, so that's kind of nice to see, kind of refreshing. Yama question, will it be a death storage or a gravestone? And will we have a cheaper death fee initially? Dying inside Yama's domain will pop a gravestone out at the bottom of the chasm of fire. Gravestone fees are reduced by 75% until you've racked up at least 10 kill count at Yama. So it's still a grave, but even then it's reduced, which is kind of interesting. I don't think they've ever done a reduced grave cost, so this is totally new. Very interesting. I like to see that. A little bit more accessible for people trying to learn the content. I like that a lot. Gravestone is brutal because that is a 500k fee if you are in max. So this is going to be very expensive to die at. Even with that 75%, that's a lot of money. When you compare to something like Fasani, which has extremely low death costs, I forget what it is. It's like 50k. And then next is 100k. Like this is going to be a lot more punishing if you do end up dying, which is something they've been tending towards lately, so kind of figures. Is there a slight downtime before the fight starts? Royal Titans is frustrating for the second player joining in late, for instance. Yes, the gameplay loop might be more akin to Vorkath or Grotess than Royal Titans in that regard. I'm kind of picturing like Yama's gonna be sitting on the throne and we run up and talk to him, and then you start the fight just like P1 Verzik. I like that a lot better. It was really annoying getting booted or like being unable to join after like 5 seconds at Royal Titans. That was super annoying. There's a goblin saying, will say in this instance that Yama drops uniques outright, drops loot to the floor, and has Oathplate shards as a form of soft drive protection. Difference here is that the shards also serve as reliable GP and hour increasers and allow us to create demand for another resource, Infernal Shale, which could make a new mining moneymaker work alongside. The components element here should only be relevant if you're several times overrate for a specific piece of Oathplate. So I think Yama's base form feels pretty normal by comparison to other recent releases. So if you don't fully understand how that works, basically, it's like Venator shards from Muzpa being dropped alongside like these full armor pieces. So it's like you get the armor pieces, but you also get these armor shards that have like a skilling grind associated. So if you end up, getting the wrong pieces that you need or something like that, you have this backup system, which is a much slower way overall of making the armor. So it's kind of cool. They have like a dry protection in a way, but not in a way that's like annoying like DT2. I think it sounds pretty good. I think it sounds like a pretty interesting way of doing it. Super excited for the release. TDs are super fun to kill with other unique mechanics and the different tech that can help in killing them. I love TDs as well. TDs is my favorite Slayer monster in the game. Honestly, they beat most bosses, like mechanically. They're very fun to kill. Same way that Tob is made enjoyable at higher levels by bringing more and more unique items. Without giving too much away, will Yama benefit from players bringing similar tech? There's room for it. Whether players opt for it, I can't say. Okay, so maybe we get some weird weapons in there and some weird mechanics going on. They don't mention attack speed here, but it could be something like that where you're bringing weird items. I'm remembering like DDS on the core at Toa. I would expect some weird item is going to get picked. I'll be looking for it. I'll be hunting for it. We'll see. Would be curious to know how the OSRS team approached the core duo fight of Yama. Is it something fast-paced like Vardorvis or something that needs slow and steady attention like Fasani? We'll also be excited to hear any other thoughts about the approach on how to balance all 3 styles. We hardly have any bosses where all 3 styles are utilized effectively. So it's a bit in the middle. There's parts of the fight that are slow and parts that aren't, hoping the pacing feels good. If that sounds bad to you, just remember there's like P3 Verzik where like, it's very intensive for a little bit, and then you get to web run and it's fairly simple, and then it's fairly intensive for a little bit, and then you're chilling at yellows and you're brewing. Like, there's a lot of downtime at a boss like that. Honestly, that sounds pretty refreshing. Like, that sounds quite good, that you get little breaks in between. I'm good with that. In regards to 3 styles, I think this is generally better left to raids. It's quite exhausting switching gear repeatedly, and it also takes up a lot of inventory space to have 3 sets of gear. That's not to say we won't have any boss in the future that requires Tribrid. Royal Titans sort of do, but that's some negatives with bringing all 3 styles with you. Okay, so it sounds like Nex. Again, like Nex, where you're doing primarily 2 styles, and that's about it. Okay, sounds fair. Tribrid is pretty exhausting. I could agree. So saving that for raids is fair enough. Are you worried that contracts will end up being the best way to farm uniques, similar to how Toa is being farmed at raid level 540 by endgame players at this point? Or will the challenge reward ratio be more similar to Awakened DT2 bosses, where it is much less rewarding to farm compared to the normal variant? It's hard for me to answer this without giving too much information, but for the overwhelming amount of players, they won't be farming contracts very often. Interesting. So it sounds like they're significantly harder, potentially less fun to grind. Hopefully not that one. The original comparison was the Awakened bosses, and this to an extent still holds true. You're going to have to be very good and very consistent to make money. This is maybe the most important one of all. As many in the thread are asking, I'm trying to figure out how to buy low and sell high. Could you shine some light on whether for this update I should try to sell high or buy low, or both? I don't know. I'm confused. Can you just tell me what to buy? Yes, I can answer this question. We don't need a Jmod in this. I already know what you're gonna need. We'll just say that a boss that some people consider a chicken is gonna be quite important here. That's all I'm gonna say. Keep that in mind. Very, very important to remember. Chicken boss. Are you able to give us the rough drop rates for uniques or a rough comparison? Drop rates will be shared after launch fairly quickly within a week or 2. That's standard. That's typically what they do. We looked at Nex and Bandos for comparative grinds. Oathplate time to completion sits somewhere in the middle. Interesting. So this is saying, so Bandos is obviously the faster boss to complete here, where Nex is very slow. Bandos is not a particularly fast boss to complete either, but he's saying there's somewhere in between. So effectively, Arcane here is saying that the time to complete the items at Yama is going to be faster than Nex. To what extent? We don't know, but interesting. That's probably good because I feel like Nex takes a really, really, really long time. Given all the info we have, how would you both rate the difficulty of base Yama, more so towards base Vardorvis or more towards something like Fasani's Nightmare? I'd say Yama in his base form is a notch beyond regular Vardorvis. The fight length is, if soloing, is closer to Fasani's Nightmare though, but less intense punishing in ways. So he doesn't even say like solo is harder than Fasani or equal to Fasani. Like it still is a little bit less bad, it sounds like, based on that. So it sounds like solo is not going to be really that crazy difficulty-wise. It'll probably be harder, but not ridiculous based on what I'm seeing here. Since contracts are soloable, I assume normal mode will also be fairly easy to solo. Do you have a rough estimate for average solo kill times? Hard for me to quote solo times without putting myself in a spot to be made fun of. But anyway, we were getting between about 8 minutes depending on setups and effort, etc. I think Arcane is hard on himself because I think Arcane is really, really good, and I don't know who he was doing it with in testing. So 8 minutes is, yeah, that's fairly close to your typical Fasani kill, assuming you have fairly solid gear. So it sounds like solo is going to be very, very doable. From everything I'm seeing, they're like kind of shouting from the rooftop, solo is totally fine. Yeah, if that's you and you were like, dang, this update's not for me, it's too hard to get a duo partner, it sounds like you're in luck. Will there be a bank next to Yama similar to the bank camel at Toa and Nex? No. There's a Fairy Ring DJR nearby and some new agility shortcuts within the chasm though. So the fastest way to get there is gonna be Fairy Ring. Hopefully the agility shortcuts make it a lot faster to get down there. We'll see. I don't want a Fasani run, but I don't think it will be. Will this content be doable for one defense pures, or will unavoidable chip damage make me eat the entire fight? Absolutely doable on a pure and has been in testing. No mention of chip damage in the answer, but interesting that it's doable for pures. That definitely makes it sound like it's going to be feasible to get through this at lower stats and stuff. So interesting to hear. Okay, and we're getting into the more like discussion heavy lines. So that's like basically all the news that we could glean from that. But this is more getting into the devs like thought process. So let's read this. Hey Arcane, what are the most important bits you've learned from your employment at Jagex over the years that have culminated in what we're going to be facing on Wednesday? In other words, what missteps? I don't want to say mistakes because sometimes that is only revealed with the benefit of hindsight. A big thing I've learned is that intensity doesn't make a good boss fight. It has been very easy to fall into and hard to get out of. The trap of always wanting the player to be doing something in an encounter, whether that's moving, dodging an attack, swapping prayer, gear, etc. It's completely fine and often better for the players to be able to simply chill for a bit within the fight, even more so in our model, where the player has to kill the boss hundreds or thousands of times. I totally agree with this, and a really good example is like Olm phases, where it's like, you know, it's really intensive for a phase, and then you have a little bit to breathe, where it's like you get to spam brew, you get to do whatever you need to do in between, and get ready to start the next phase. Like having downtime at bosses is really, really good. So I'm glad to see him saying that. Very interesting. I'm hoping the pacing of Yama feels right. It feels intense when it should, but doesn't exhaust you while trying to be engaging. And trivia, Yama really likes pizza. Okay, skip the chicken line. Pineapple pizza, boys! It's confirmed. The mods have said it. Just saying. Just saying. That item, they were like, hey, you might need to be bringing unique items and stuff. Pineapple pizza. Just saying. We've got to feed a Yama a tasty snack to get him to stop hitting us. Probably. Surely. By many. I don't have any in my bank, I promise. I would be curious to hear more philosophy around the devs' intent and purpose for how contracts function. Many players, especially after experiencing Awakener orbs, typically feel like these systems limit gameplay in a not so meaningful way. Blorva is more a flex about your GP stack rather than your skill. I acknowledge that the contract system seems slightly better than orbs, but the feeling of being restricted from tackling options hard content feels super jarring to me. But I feel like the devs haven't dove into their design philosophy behind contracts too much. I would love to maybe understand more and get a different perspective on the system for why you think it should exist this way. I completely agree with this comment as well. I don't think it's good to gate people out of content in any way. What do we say in response to this? Understandable. In general, the inspiration came from PoE, where the entire economy benefits from a top-down approach, where lower level players can farm items that high level players can purchase, instead of the high level players simply being able to farm everything that a lower level player can. For example, anglerfish, since they aren't really on drop tables. We have that too, they just take it a step further where the entire end game is itemized and tradable, including access to boss fights. Their game is very different than ours, and we shouldn't and we aren't trying to fully replicate what they have, but we do see the benefit of being able to effectively siphon some value out from the top level players and provide it to the lower level players. In essence, we need to give players an adequate amount of value on drop tables for you to feel like your time was well spent. Outside of the rare, unique, exciting drop, we can't realistically just keep pumping out dozens of seeds or millions of alkables, etc. without harming other parts of the game. So this is an attempt at solving that problem. We add these entry tokens to harder versions of the fight, and it bolsters the drop table in the process. At the end of the day, if universally people say this isn't it ain't worth it, it feels bad, etc., then we'll simply stop, but this is the reasoning why we've been trying it, because there's benefits to be had. He gave the example of anglerfish. I have a lot of other examples in the game where wealthy players are the people sinking an item out for the benefit of other players. Really good example is blood vials. Blood vials are used to charge the scythe, but the primary use for blood vials and the overall sink is bastion potions. Bastion potions are typically not a very useful potion, except in very rare cases where high-level players are trying to eke out the absolute min-max for a boss. So like people that are trying Inferno, other people using these potions usually. So vials of blood are sunk out of the game only by players willing to use this supply that is only really worth it to them, because normal players are just using normal ranging potions and aren't seeing a real big difference. There's a lot of other cases that I can give examples of, like blood shard scythe users. For a long time, any pet hunter like going for a boss that was scythe, it was like just spam Blood Fury to allow them to keep hitting the boss, and Blood Fury uses three charges per scythe swing. So those get drained rapidly by endgame players. So there's a lot of these, like, I know there's a couple more too, like Sand Fuse being used by Inferno runners. Those are great boosters for Hallowed Sepulchre. And then things like Sweets in CM are only ever used by the highest level players, and people doing clues get a huge benefit out of that. Like they make a bunch of money off high level players willing to use the Sweets. So these are examples of like item drops that are really only sunk out of the game by high level players. Like they're the only ones really using these, at least for the most part. We already have this. We already have this in the game. It doesn't happen everywhere or all the time, but there's definitely items that are being sunk out of the game mainly by only the high level players. But the entry token fee, I have a problem with, because directly gating content is totally different from soft gating like supply cost. What having an expensive gate on accessing a boss does, that is a consumable, it's used every time you enter a boss, is two things. First of all, and I've talked about this like from my perspective as someone who loves doing these bosses and wants to just do them constantly, get large amounts of KC, do speed runs, do challenges, is that I am prevented from doing the content long term unless I make absurd amounts of gold somewhere. Do things like services, whatever it is. Like even like high level PVM does not cover the cost of Awakener's orbs. For context, Porkazard hopped in my Twitch stream and we were having a discussion, and he mentioned that over his 2,000 Awaken Levi KC, he ended up with negative 900 mil, like total. Perfect KC, assuming no deaths over those kills, like his loot tracker was negative 900 mil. Besides like the death fees on top of dying, besides the resets, when you just can't succeed at something, just getting KC, it was negative 900 mil total over all of his KC. So this is incredibly inhibitive. It's incredibly cost inhibitive to anybody that wants to go mess around with these bosses after completing them, to the point where I've just personally as a player, and I know I'm not the only one, has decided that, okay, I got Blorva, I can't afford to keep doing these bosses, so I won't kill them. This is really bad for the longevity of high-level content, considering, you know, it takes a while for them to make high-level updates. It's fairly difficult. It takes a lot of dev time. We only saw one last year with Colosseum. Typically, it's like 1 or 2 updates. Like 2 updates is a good year, and we're getting like Yama and Mocha this year. It's a good year for us. Like we're getting 2 updates. So these updates kind of need to last like for a long time, and this really hurts the longevity when you gate the players from doing them entirely. Like it's just not worth going in. The other side of this issue is that it also gates people trying to learn stuff from attempting. Like a good example is like you're sending chambers, you're sending solo chambers. You're like, all right, I'm getting the feel for it. I'm up to like 100 KC. All right, feeling good. Maybe I should try that. Maybe I should try that challenge mode thing. Maybe that's worth a shot. I might be good enough to start doing it. And then it costs you an item to go do it that costs 1 mil. Okay, every time you want to go in and do a challenge mode raid, it costs you 1 mil. Well, as the person with 100 KC, I'd go, you know what, on second thought, maybe I wait till like 1,000 KC. You know, I'm going to put that off a long, long time until I'm well certain I'm capable of doing it and it's worth my time. One of the things it does is gatekeep people trying to learn, at least until they've made a bunch of money from going and learning something difficult, which as somebody that makes guides and is always trying to get people into doing stuff, like I have all kinds of Inferno guides, Colosseum guides, like I want people to try things that are outside of people's comfort zone and like, you know, give things a shot that are a step above, that are really fun. Putting a gate, such a drastic like cost on things like this is bad for encouraging people to give things a try, to like go try new things that are difficult to get into. Imagine if like Inferno had a 1 mil cost to enter. Like, would you go give it a try? If you haven't done your Inferno cape yet and it cost 1 mil every time you entered Inferno, would you try it like anytime soon? Probably not. At the very least, you'd put it off until much later. And this is the thing I see from a lot of people in my chat. They're like, oh, I don't have the money to do Blorva yet. I'm not doing that. But I see people that want to. Like, I see people that are like, man, I wish I could do Blorva, but I don't have all 3 mega rares. Man, I wish I could do Blorva, but I don't have a huge cash stack right now. You know, things like that. So I feel the benefit, and there is a benefit in increasing the GP an hour a little bit, you know, people grinding the boss normally. That is a benefit, and that's a good thing. It is good to, I will fully admit that taking gold from the super rich players and feeding it back into like mid-level accounts is a good thing. Even as a rich player where like that's a negative thing for me. I want to keep as much gold as possible, right? That is a benefit like economically and just for like getting people to try things. I get why they want to do this, but it has so many repercussions. It's so negative overall that I really feel they should look towards making things more like Blood Vials, more like Sandfuse, more like Purple Sweets. These like item additions that are only minorly. An idea I had was like maybe Yama drops a worm. Okay, we saw the worms that he drops for like anglerfish that they were going to do. What if Yama drops these worms that can be crushed up and added to a prayer enhance that make it last 1 minute longer? Okay, very minor benefit. And maybe these worms would be kind of rare, kind of expensive. So these are a thing that most people would elect not to use. They would just continue using a normal prayer regen. But for the super high level speedrunners that need every prayer point for things like Inferno, Colosseum, we'd be willing to dump double the cost on a potion like that. So I feel like things like that are a much better way of doing wealth redistribution than things like a hard gate on accessing content. It just feels like it negatively hampers the boss in so many different ways. And then the only people that benefit are the people not interacting with the gate-kept content. They're the only ones that get a benefit. Really quick, while we're talking about it, I wanted to check exactly how big is that benefit. So I did the numbers on, so I have 2 bosses. I have Whisper and Vardorvis, okay? And I just, for simplicity's sake, I took the EHB numbers off Temple. If you don't know what EHB is, it's efficient hours bossed. It is the max amount of boss kills you can get on average per hour, assumed by Temple. So this is Gigamax, assuming you have an ult for like Spec Transfer Heal, getting you supplies, like this is the most kills per hour you can get. And it's gonna scale down the exact same percentage regardless, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm just going off of that. For Whisper, it's 21 KC. For Vardorvis, it's 39. The wiki has a nice breakdown of the added profit of every single item that you can get. So what I want to do is take that total profit. Let's just round everything to the nearest 100K. And let's subtract the Soul Reaper axe. This makes my argument even worse, I will say, because when I take away even more of the profit of a different item, it makes the total percentage in Awakener Orb matter more, okay? So I'm giving the other side benefit of the doubt here. Like I'm giving you every opportunity. So I'm subtracting the axe out. Not everybody's going to go complete their axes. It comes to a nice even 10 mil an hour. Okay, so if we take the Awakener's Orbs, which I'm not going to do the nearest 100K because it's such a small number, Okay, so we take the profit of Awakener's Orbs, which is 430k of the total, and we're going to take that over the total GP an hour, which is 10 mil. Not a huge percentage here. And then we see it's 4.3% when you take it 2 decimal places over, and then you get the percentage of the total. So Awakener's Orbs increase your Vardorvis profit by about 4%. Okay, so Vardorvis has a lower drop rate of orbs, and it's also the most profitable with Ultor Ring being the best ring. So let's do Whisper, okay? Whisper is less total profit an hour, and also much higher chance of getting an Awakener's Orb total. We have 9.6 mil an hour. We're going to subtract Soul Reaper Axe, which is 4.2 mil here. You see, Whisper is not great total an hour. So it's 5.4 mil. We are going to take the total Awakener's Orbs, which is 540k in this case, over, hey, this is a super easy number, 5.4 mil, 0.1. That's 10%. We've seen the worst and best case. Vardorvis is about 4% of the total profit. Whisper is about 10% of the total profit on the orbs, okay? Awakener's Orbs effectively increase the profit by 5 to 10% at these bosses. So the benefit of, gatekeeping a ton of people from doing the content, both, people looking to get into it and people looking to really annihilate it, like dig into it, do challenges, do speedruns, is a 5 to 10% increase in profit for, players just doing the normal bosses, which is not nothing, but I think it's really, really minor considering the downsides of a system like this. It's to the point Jmods saw the system and are willing at this point to update Awakener's Orbs. They've said that back a few tabs, that they are willing to put in a permanent unlock method of doing these bosses. So we'll finally pick up the rest of what he said. On the point about Blorva being a flex about your GP stack rather than skill, I strongly disagree with you. I think Blorva is a massive skill flex, and even more so because you can flex even harder if you manage to get yours without using many orbs at all. Blorva is definitely a skill flex. It is not free, at least to some extent, okay? But would it be not more impressive if someone attempted Awaken bosses without all 3 mega rares? Because almost always people, when they do Blorva, do it with all 3 mega rares. So wouldn't it be sick if somebody went and did it early without many KCs just to send it and manage to get it? Would that not be more of a flex? I do feel like this gate is, I don't know the word for it, holding back people's achievement a little bit. There's definitely people that are capable of doing like Awaken Leviathan with a Bofa and just are not able to because it costs such a ridiculous amount to go attempt that. It would be like doing Inferno with a Bofa, I guess. Not quite the same, but like, people that did it earlier than the people that have like Gigamax, like with T-Bow, Masori, everything. It's just like, wow, you went for it a little early. Okay, that's kind of sick. I do feel like it's more of a flex if you do it with worse gear, which you just don't see from Awakened bosses. That aspect is just ripped out of it. I don't think this is too dissimilar with other aspects of the game. If you see someone with a scythe, they spend a lot of money to earn that. That's cool. Yeah, but in a different way. Blorva is somewhat the same. There's prestige and money, but also prestige in the skill of obtaining it. I don't think these are exclusive to each other. They're definitely different, but like fair enough. Like it's both a skill and money flex at the same time. Yes. I feel the system would be better if it was a purely skill flex and it was like, okay, I'm capable of going for that at X point in my account progression versus, I need everything, and the only time I'm ever going to go for this is once I have all 3 mega rares and a big cash stack, and then I'll go for it. Where it's like, it's impressive in a different way. And I can already picture comments saying like, well, it's just a cosmetic. Like, you don't have to go do it. Okay, I get that. It is just for a cosmetic. There's no tangible reward for this. But like I was saying earlier, high-level updates are so few and far between. Why are we dedicating them to just a cosmetic one time? No repeatability, and gating people out of doing it early. Like, what is the point of that? Do we not want to, give people things to do for long periods of time so there's less whining, there's less complaining, there's less bitching, there's less moaning? High-level updates need to bring a lot of value just inherently because of how difficult they are to make and how rare they are in comparison to other updates. But also, if those contracts are much cheaper, the benefit is also lessened because those contracts that you're grinding, if they are in huge supply in comparison to Awakener's Orbs, you're going to get less profit from them. It still has the same issues, and even if it feels less bad to interact with, it also feels less good for the people benefiting from it. So I feel like we should be looking for ways to avoid using this system. It has so many drawbacks. There is ways of siphoning wealth from us rich players that don't do this. There are loads of ways, and they've done it in the past many, many times. This is not the be-all, end-all. It is not necessary. Another really common thing I've seen people say is, well, supplies are a gatekeep. Everything takes supplies. That gate keeps you out of doing stuff. When you run out of supplies, you can't do it anymore. And I've heard the same thing for gear. Yes, technically, yes. You cannot do a boss unlimited times, but typically the boss does cover the supplies if you're killing him and not dying 8,000 times to him. There's ways to mitigate supply use at so many different bosses. There's so many different ways. Prayer flicking, playing well and not taking damage. Like, there's ways to mitigate damage. So these are not hard gates. These are soft gates that you can get around. Kind of like what I said with the gear as well earlier. This system encourages you to wait until you have all 3 mega rares to go kill awakened bosses, right? But in theory, you could get around that gate with worse gear, with more skill, right? So these are soft gates. These are not hard gates of, if you don't have enough money, you're done, right? Leave, pack it up. Like, see you later. It's not the same thing. They are not. There's a difference between hard and soft gates. RuneScape is all about different gates that you find ways to bypass, like, all the time. That's the whole point of leveling skills, like getting better at things. That's the whole thing. But putting down hard gates, these hard gates that prevent you from doing things that you want to do, potentially forever, are not good. We want people to do content. That's the point of adding it. Why are we even adding the update if you don't want people to do it, right? So I actually came up with a couple other methods, which have pros and cons of siphoning wealth or sinking wealth. The first idea I had was just increase the death cost at these hard bosses. So like, hey, hard bosses need to sink wealth away from wealthy players. Maybe the death cost could be 2 times more, 3 times more. At least then, it's punishing mistakes. But if you play well, like, you can continue to do it. Now, of course, that still has the issue of punishing people who want to learn content, which I think is bad. You want to actively encourage people. A good example of actively encouraging people to get into content is that reduced gravestone fee they're putting in, right? They do this on a lot of bosses. Like, you don't pay that death fee until a certain point. That encourages players to do that. Well, if you increase the death fee, it's the opposite. So, you know, there's a negative there. Like, I still want to encourage people to get into doing more difficult things. There's also the idea that people have constantly suggested making the boss drop his Awakener orb or his contract that you completed at the end, so you get to repeat it, assuming you clear it. Now, this also has problems. Exact same thing as I said earlier. This punishes people learning and removes the punishment for endgame players that are perfect, which is an improvement, but I still really don't want to be punishing people for trying a boss. Another great thing that they've done, which does not gatekeep anything, is adding these currency systems to bosses. So a good example is Sunfire Splinters. I think Sunfire Splinters are maybe 50% of your total profit an hour at Coliseum. It's ridiculous. Like, almost the entire profit from Coliseum is Sunfire Splinters, and Coliseum is, I think, the best moneymaker in the game, or very close to top. Like, it's extremely far up there. And people don't like Chargescape and things like that, but it really helps give high-level players something to sink out en masse, because when we have a ton of money, we don't care about using things like charges. Like, it's not a concern at all, and we use them in bulk. So if you add more things like that use charges for some kind of benefit, this could be things like, it doesn't have to be charges on items either. It could be something like Vials of Blood. Vials of Blood are kind of the same thing, where it's a unique drop to Tob, and it gives you a slightly better potion. Things like that are things that high-level players sink out of the game to a ridiculous degree. And if they're not a massive benefit over, you know, the prior item, it doesn't feel necessary if you are like a mid-level player. I've seen people like avoid using divines because of the cost, right? Hey, you shouldn't do that, by the way. You should use divines always. They're really, really good, and they're worth the money no matter what. Unrelated to what I'm talking about. This kind of like unique charge or currency or whatever is really, really good for adding extra profit to bosses. So doing more things like that, if they find a need to like redistribute wealth, works really well. Final idea I had was like a bulk amount of either gold or like some item you get to permanently unlock the boss. So maybe you get 50 contracts and you can just unlock the Oath Plate kit version of the boss. So this does sink a huge amount of bulk out. You lose a tiny bit on the extremely good players that are going to grind the boss into oblivion, like the Port Khazards willing to do 2,000 orbs. Like, theirs don't get sunk out of the game. But what this does is open the range of players that are capable of doing this. If it costs like, you know, 50 to 100 orbs to permanently unlock Awakened bosses, I think many, many, many more players would be attempting it. Even though it's probably like per player, probably sinking less orbs, it's getting more players into the system and interacting with it. So that's at least like increasing the size of the net. Because one of the issues with Awakener's orbs is that if you feel it's not worth doing, you know, Awakened bosses post-Blorva because of the cost, you're not sinking any orbs out. The only people that sink orbs out are the people that are doing these challenges, these speedruns, and are willing to grind the bosses post Blorva. So if it's bad enough that like you're not willing to go back, like me, I'm not willing to go back, you know, nothing happens. We don't interact with the system, nothing gets sunk. So the more people you can get like doing it is good. That increases the amount of stuff sunk out of the game. This is the very, very last comment we're going to look at. So why market this as a duo boss, then making the only desirable encounter everybody wanted duo solo? So before I read the response, I will say duo has a lot more complexity than solo. Doing teamwork, making call-outs with your teammate, doing things like that is totally different from like a solo boss. I do feel like it was a shame that they ended up going with this system that kind of forced them to make a duo. Let's read the response. The original goal for Yama was to be a new endgame duo boss. Contracts were envisioned as an extra bit of spice on top. During development, we came across the problems that we highlighted in the primer last week, and currently we still think that the best course of action is to make them solo, unfortunately. One big issue we highlighted during playtesting was that having a tradable item that will potentially have a high value, whether that's GP or it's simply rare and hard to obtain, and both players don't have an equal amount of risk investment in the encounter, would lead to potential awkward social dynamics. For example, I need a friend to duo with my contract that is precious to me. I put in my 100%, obviously, because I care about the output of the encounter. My ally potentially doesn't put in 100%, or I perceive them as not putting in 100%, and we fail. This leaves the player in a situation of doubt. We can foresee this causing arguments. I will say, yeah, that would be super toxic, obviously. I think it's a big bummer that they had this idea for paid or tradable contracts. Got to the point in development where they're like, hey, this duo boss is going to be kind of toxic if we do this, and didn't go, maybe we should take a step back, not use this system this time, and figure something else out. And they instead went, no, let's force it and change the duo boss into a solo boss. I think that is a real shame, because something is definitely lost when you change a boss from a group boss to a solo. And everything I've been reading as well, it's been like, solo's totally fine, solo's totally good, it'll be a little bit better in duo. It kind of feels like what they said a lot with Toa as well, where they were like, group Toa is a little bit faster, it'll be worth doing it. But in reality, it's boiled down to everybody just solos it for the most part. So I think a lot of the design is clearly lost here at the cost of these tradable contracts. In general, my response to this would be player-made problem. They can solve that themselves, but it's still our job to try and minimize places where players could get at each other negatively, and we didn't want to risk souring the content like that. This isn't really an issue at any other team content in the game currently, because the only thing people are realistically investing is their time, rather than an item that holds potentially more value for a one-shot encounter. So just like further explaining that like, it's purely because the contracts are tradable that they went with this system and it's toxic. In hindsight, I think having what the contract system provides as a duo encounter is a bit at odds with each other. It may have been better as something for a solo encounter. So he literally says what I just said, like, hey, we probably shouldn't have done this. Or just reworking entirely. We're so open to changing this post-launch if we can find a design that works better. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. How could they possibly change the system post-launch when there's this item on the GE and people have a bunch of them? I don't think they feasibly can change the system at this point. Like how do you make a solo boss into a duo boss and get rid of the contracts that are tradable? It's too much to change. You have to rip out a huge chunk of content. Big mistake here, like not communicating with us what's going on, just going with something even though it doesn't really work super well, and then going, well, we'll try to fix it later, but we all know it's not going to be a clean fix, whatever they end up going with. There's ways to improve it, like they've mentioned, like ways to improve it, which I really appreciate. This is a worse piece of content overall from the lack of communication, from the lack of forethought, which is a shame. It's a real shame. A lot of people were excited for a new duo boss that's kind of high level, and, complexity is being taken away from the boss because they went with this system. Mad props for even putting out this AMA like so quickly. Like, hey, there's some like worries and concerns in the community. Let's quick whip up an AMA. Let's put ourselves out there and answer some questions about the bosses. Mad respect. That's like the best possible approach. And they've basically like admitted like they've made some mistakes. Both Goblin and Arcane have mentioned repeatedly that, this didn't go perfectly as intended. So I really appreciate like the owning it and the, hey, let me give you the details that you guys were missing. Let's get some communication going. Mad respect. They don't always do this. And I want to give props when they do, approach things the right way and actually come and communicate with us. I will say, if the boss is not exactly as you wanted it to be, it's not for me either. If the boss is not perfect and the way you envisioned it, don't go screaming at Jmods and calling out individuals like person by person. I said this last video. There's just no need for it. And they very, very obviously are like putting themselves out there and trying to make the content better. And they are willing to like improve things. Give your feedback, give your honest feedback, but also don't like attack anybody. There's just no need for it. It's unnecessary. Nobody needs that. The Jmods do care about this. They want it to be good. And, you know, a couple mistakes were made. Unfortunate. It happens. Regardless of being disappointed by some aspects, I'm still really excited for Yama on Wednesday, which I will be streaming as soon as it comes up. I'll be sending duos with Sax, and we'll probably be messing around with the horn there and stuff. So that's the plan. Very, very hyped. I will be there as soon as the update drops, and we'll also be on the front page of Twitch. So that'll be cool. I am planning to try to go for World First Solo, so that should be super sick to go for. And I'll probably be doing lots of, I'll be trying to put out a guide fairly quickly, and I'll be trying to do some challenges, maybe like a lower budget solo, like once it's been cleared, that kind of thing. So that'll be interesting. Some challenges, some guides, a lot of content coming up. That's the plan. And hey, Arcane said earlier that he's going to try it on his 1600 total level Iron Man. You should be getting in there too. Even if you're not like the best PVMer in the game, you don't have an Inferno Cape and everything, Yama sounds like it'll be doable. Even if you don't have a duo partner, it sounds like it'll be fairly doable. So get in there. The day of release content is so fun, like learning with other people, checking streams, getting ideas. It's always such a good time. You should get in there. And also post-release, try to give your feedback, because they've clearly said repeatedly they're totally willing to like rework things if it needs to happen post-release. So don't stop giving feedback just because the boss comes out. Like we can keep letting them know, hey, this kind of stinks. This is kind of cool. You should keep doing stuff like this. You know, that kind of stuff. That's it for the video. Leave a like and subscribe. Bye. Mwah!